There's a moment that comes to every person, usually late at night, when the house is quiet and the mind refuses to settle. You are thinking about something you want, something you have been hoping for, working toward, waiting to arrive. And underneath that hope, there is a familiar pressure, a knot in the chest, the quiet fear that it might not happen, that something will go wrong, that despite your best efforts, life will once again remind you that you are not the one in control. Most people carry this weight for so long they stop noticing it. They think it is simply part of wanting something, part of being responsible, part of being realistic. But tonight, I want to ask you something different. What if the weight is not necessary? What if the fear is not protecting you, but preventing you? What if the very posture you have adopted toward your future, this careful, guarded, bracing for impact posture, is the single thing keeping your future at a distance? This is not wishful thinking. This is not blind optimism. This is something far older and far more practical than that. And it begins with a shift so subtle, most people never notice it passing them by. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a very still lake. It is early morning. Perhaps there is a mist rising from the surface, or maybe the air is so clear you can see the bottom near the shore. The water is smooth, clear, perfectly calm. You can see your own reflection looking back at you, your silhouette, the sky behind you, the trees along the bank, all rendered in soft, silent perfection on that liquid mirror. And in your hand, you hold a small stone, smooth, cool, fitting perfectly in your palm. You know what happens when you drop that stone. You have known since you were a child. The water breaks. Ripples move outward in perfect circles, widening and widening until they reach the shore and dissipate. The reflection distorts, shatters into 1,000 moving pieces, and then slowly, gradually, settles back into stillness. Peace returns, the mirror reforms, and you are left standing exactly where you were, unchanged, unharmed, perhaps even pleased by the brief disturbance. Now imagine that you stand at that same lake every single day. Perhaps it is part of your morning routine. You walk down the same path, stand at the same spot, hold the same stone. And every day, you brace yourself before dropping it. Your shoulders tense, your jaw tightens, your stomach knots. You prepare for the splash. Why? You know what is coming. You have seen it 1,000 times. There is nothing new here, no hidden danger, no unpredictable variable. The stone falls, the water breaks, the ripples move, the reflection returns. Every single time, without exception. There is no danger here. There is no surprise. There is no possibility of harm. And yet, you brace. This is how most people move through life. They brace for outcomes they have already seen 1,000 times. They prepare for disappointment as if preparing will somehow lessen the impact, somehow soften the landing, somehow make the inevitable hurt a little more bearable. They approach their own desires with a kind of guarded suspicion, as if wanting something too openly, too freely, too trustingly might invite the universe to take it away. As if the universe is watching, waiting, ready to punish those who hope too loudly. And here is the hidden problem. The problem no one talks about. The problem that hides in plain sight, dressed in respectable clothing, accepted by society as wisdom. Bracing is not preparation. Bracing is resistance. When you brace for impact, you are not protecting yourself. You are not making yourself safer. You are not building resilience or strength or emotional armor. You are doing something far more subtle and far more damaging. You are telling your nervous system that danger is coming. You are telling your mind that the future is something to survive, not something to receive. You are training your body to expect the worst, to prepare for the worst, to look for the worst. And your mind, ever faithful, ever obedient, ever eager to prove itself useful, begins to look for evidence that you are right. You begin to notice every obstacle, every delay, every sign that things might not work out. Not because the signs are new, not because the world has suddenly turned against you, but because you are finally looking for them. You have commissioned your own surveillance system, and it is working perfectly. It is finding exactly what you asked it to find, and it brings its findings to you each night, laying them out like evidence, proving to you that your bracing was justified, that your tension was wise, that your guarded suspicion was the only reasonable response to a world that cannot be trusted. This is the quiet agreement most people make with life. It is never spoken aloud. It is never written down, but it is there, buried in the nervous system, encoded in the posture, whispered in the spaces between thoughts. I will not hope too loudly, and in exchange, I will not be hurt too deeply. I will not expect too much, and in exchange, I will not be disappointed too often. I will keep my desires small, my dreams quiet, my hopes hidden, and in exchange, life will go easy on me. Life will leave me alone. Life will not test me beyond what I can bear. It feels like wisdom. It feels like maturity. It feels like the hard-earned lesson of someone who has been burned before and has finally learned not to touch the flame. It is actually something else entirely. It is a slow, steady withdrawal from the very current that carries all achievement forward. It is a gradual, polite, well-mannered retreat from the fullness of life. It is a quiet agreement to accept less, expect less, receive less, in exchange for the illusion of safety. And the tragedy is that the safety never comes. The bracing never prevents the hurt. The guarded suspicion never protects the heart. It only ensures that when the good things come, and they do come, they always come, life is never only one thing. You are too tense to receive them fully, too braced to feel them deeply, too guarded to let them in. Most people never notice this agreement. They never realize they have been standing at the edge of their own life, bracing for a splash that never comes, preparing for a disaster that never arrives, guarding against a disappointment that may or may not ever show up. They simply wonder why the water never seems to carry them anywhere, why the current always seems to flow past them, never under them, why their boat remains moored to the dock while others drift out toward the open sea. They do not realize that they are the ones holding the rope. They do not realize that the bracing has become a way of life. They do not realize that the very posture they adopted to protect themselves has become the prison that holds them. And so they stand at the edge of the lake, day after day, year after year, stone in hand, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, waiting for something that never comes, missing the one thing that has been there all along. The simple, quiet, radical truth. You do not need to brace. You only need to drop the stone. There is a word that has been misunderstood for generations. A word that has been locked inside cages of caution and practicality, stored away on high shelves where ordinary people cannot reach it. The word is faith. When most people hear this word, they think of religion, of cathedrals and incense and things that cannot be proven. They think of belief without evidence. They think of blind hope, the kind reserved for saints and mystics and those who have not yet been bruised by reality. And because they are practical people, sensible people, people who have been burned by hope before, they set it aside. They return it to the shelf. They tell themselves that faith is beautiful for those who need it, but they themselves need something more solid, more reliable, more real. But faith was never meant to be reserved for the divine. Faith is not the opposite of reason. Faith is not the enemy of evidence. Faith is simply the willingness to act before all the facts are known. And in this sense, faith is the currency of every single achievement in human history. Think about it. Every bridge ever built, every book ever written, every business ever started, every life ever changed, every movement, every invention, every healing, every reconciliation. Each one began with a person who acted as if something invisible was already true. They did not have proof. They did not have guarantees. They did not have a signed contract from the universe promising that their effort would not be wasted. They had only the quiet, stubborn decision to move forward as though the outcome was already certain. And here's the trap that keeps intelligent, capable, well-meaning people living far below their potential, wondering why their lives feel smaller than they once imagined. They wait for certainty before they commit. They wait for the fear to dissipate. They wait for the right sign, the right season, the right alignment of circumstances. They wait for the guarantee that no wise person ever actually receives. And while they wait, the current passes them by. The moment ripens and then passes. The door opens and then closes. And they are left standing on the shore, still waiting, still preparing, still telling themselves that they are being responsible. This waiting feels like wisdom. It feels cautious and mature. Society rewards this posture. We call it being realistic. We call it managing expectations. We call it protecting yourself from disappointment. We give medals to those who wait, who do not risk, who do not embarrass themselves by wanting too openly. We call them prudent. We call them sensible. We call them safe. But let us be honest with one another tonight. Not brutally honest. Not aggressively honest. Just quietly, gently honest. The way you might speak to yourself in the mirror at the end of a long year. Has waiting for certainty ever given you certainty? Has preparing for the worst ever made the worst easier to bear? Or has it simply extended the waiting, extended the bracing, extended the quiet, exhausted resignation that this is simply how life must be? Think of a farmer in early spring. He walks out into his field. The soil is cold. The sky is uncertain. There is no guarantee of sun, no promise of rain at the right time, no assurance that the frost will not return and kill everything he plants. By every reasonable measure, it would be wiser to wait. Wait for warmer weather. Wait for more predictable conditions. Wait until he can be certain. But the farmer knows something that the cautious mind can never grasp. The seed does not require certainty. The seed requires soil. The seed requires darkness. The seed requires the willingness to be buried before it can become what it was meant to be. And if the farmer waits until all conditions are perfect, he will wait forever. The season will pass. The field will remain empty. And he will be praised by his neighbors for his prudence while his children go hungry. This is the mental trap. Not laziness. Not a lack of ambition. Not a fear of hard work. It is something far more subtle, far more respectable, and far more dangerous. It is the belief that you must feel ready before you act. It is the belief that you must have all the answers before you speak. It is the belief that you must be certain of the outcome before you invest your heart. And this belief, this quiet, reasonable, well-mannered belief, has buried more dreams than failure ever could. Failure, at least, leaves a scar. Failure teaches something. Failure is a teacher with a harsh voice but valuable lessons. But waiting teaches nothing. Waiting preserves nothing except the dream itself, held at arm's length, perfectly intact, perfectly unrealized, perfectly safe from the risk of becoming real. Napoleon Hill spent more than 20 years studying the most successful people of his generation. He interviewed millionaires and inventors and statesmen. He sat with Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. He sat with men who had built empires from silence, who had started with nothing but an idea and the stubborn conviction that the idea deserved to exist. And what he discovered was not a formula for avoiding failure. It was not a secret technique for guaranteeing success. It was something far more radical, far more unsettling, far more difficult for the cautious mind to accept. He discovered that every single one of them, every single one, had learned to move forward before they were ready. They had learned to act as if the outcome was already theirs. Not because they were arrogant, not because they were naive, not because they had never experienced failure or disappointment or humiliation. Many of them had lost everything, sometimes more than once. But they had learned something that the cautious mind can never grasp. Certainty does not precede action. Certainty is born from action. You do not wait for the fear to leave. You move, and the fear follows behind you like a dog that has finally accepted its master. You do not wait for the doubts to dissolve. You move, and the doubts become quieter with each step, not because they have been answered, but because they have been outrun. You do not wait until you feel like the person you wish to become. You move as that person would move, speak as that person would speak, decide as that person would decide. And slowly, imperceptibly, the distance between who you are and who you are acting as begins to close. This is not pretending. This is not self-deception. This is the oldest form of learning. The way children learn to walk. The way musicians learn to play. The way lovers learn to love. You do not study walking from a textbook. You do not wait until you are certain you will not fall. You stand. You wobble. You fall. You rise. And one day, without noticing when it happened, you are no longer falling. You are running. The trap is waiting for the running to begin before you are willing to stand. The trap is believing that certainty is the prerequisite rather than the reward. The trap is forgetting that every single person who has ever achieved anything of significance began in the exact same place you are standing now. Uncertain, unready, unproven, and willing to move anyway. There's a passage in Think and Grow Rich that most readers pass over too quickly. It appears early in the book, nestled between stories of steel magnates and political advisors, tucked away in a chapter that seems, on the surface, to be about something abstract and academic. It is easy to miss, easy to skim, easy to dismiss as philosophical background before the practical instruction begins. But within this passage is the seed of everything else Hill would go on to teach. Without understanding this one principle, the rest of his work remains locked away, inaccessible, like a key without a door. He called it the principle of autosuggestion. Now, that word sounds clinical, mechanical. It sounds like something you would read in a psychology textbook from the 1920s, or hear from a stage hypnotist in a darkened theater. It sounds distant and impersonal, like a procedure performed on someone else by someone else in a language no one actually speaks. But the reality is far simpler, far more intimate, and far more powerful than the name suggests. Autosuggestion is simply this. Whatever you repeatedly tell yourself about your future, your mind will begin to treat as fact. Not as hope, not as possibility, not as something you are wishing for or working toward or waiting to see. As fact, as reality, as the way things already are and will continue to be. This is not magic. This is not the law of attraction dressed in new clothing, promising that if you think happy thoughts, the universe will deliver a new car to your driveway. This is not mysticism or superstition or wishful thinking disguised as wisdom. This is the ordinary, measurable, undeniable mechanics of the human brain. This is how the mind actually works, whether you believe in it or not, whether you understand it or not, whether you use it intentionally or accidentally. Every thought you think sends electrochemical signals through neural pathways. These signals are not neutral. They are not passive. They are active, creative, formative. Think a thought once, and you carve a faint trail, like a single footprint in fresh snow. Think that same thought 100 times, and you carve a groove, like a path worn into a forest floor by generations of feet. Think that thought 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 100,000 times, and the groove becomes a river. The river becomes a canyon. The canyon becomes the path of least resistance, the way the water naturally flows, the direction the mind travels without conscious effort or awareness. And eventually, without any decision at all, without any struggle or striving, your mind will flow in that direction automatically, effortlessly, inevitably. Most people use this principle against themselves without ever realizing it. They never read about it in a book, never hear it explained in a lecture, never recognize it in operation, but they live inside it every single day. They rehearse their failures. They replay their disappointments. They imagine, in vivid detail, every possible way things could go wrong. They picture the rejection, the loss, the humiliation. They feel the feelings ahead of time, as if practicing for a performance. They call this preparation. They call it being thorough. They call it protecting themselves from surprise. But what they are actually doing is carving the river in the direction they do not wish to travel. They are digging the channel through which their future will flow. They are building the bed of the river that will carry them exactly where they do not want to go. And then they wonder why they arrived there anyway. They wonder why their fears seem to come true more often than their hopes. They wonder why life has a way of proving them right when they expect the worst. They do not realize that they are the ones proving themselves right. They do not realize that the mind, once carved, follows its grooves faithfully. It does not judge. It does not evaluate. It does not ask whether the groove leads to a destination you actually want to reach. It simply follows the path you have worn for it. Hill observed something remarkable in the men he studied. Something subtle but unmistakable. Something that separated them from the crowd more reliably than intelligence or talent or education ever could. They did not ignore difficulty. They were not naive. They did not pretend obstacles did not exist or that challenges were not real. They could see the risks as clearly as anyone. They could count the ways things might go wrong. They were not blind to reality, but they refused to do one specific thing that most people do without thinking. They refused to rehearse the outcome they did not want. Instead, they rehearsed the outcome they intended to create. They spoke about their goals as if those goals had already been achieved. Not with arrogance, not with the desperate, clinging hope of someone trying to convince themselves. Not with the loud, performative confidence that masks deep uncertainty, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty of a farmer who knows the seed he planted will become wheat. Think of that farmer for a moment. He does not stand over the soil shouting at it. He does not dig the seed up every morning to check its progress. He does not lie awake at night worrying whether the seed remembers its instructions. He simply knows. He has done this before. He has seen the pattern. He understands that the seed contains within itself everything it needs to become what it was made to be. His role is not to force or control or anxiously monitor. His role is to prepare the ground, plant the seed, and then trust the process that has worked since the beginning of time. And because he knows, he does not abandon the field in April when there is no harvest yet visible. He does not conclude in May that he has failed. He does not dig up the seeds in June to see if anything is happening underground. He waits. He trusts. He continues his work, confident that what has been planted will eventually appear. This is autosuggestion. This is the principle that changes everything. You do not wait for evidence before you believe. You become the evidence. You do not wait for proof that things will work out. You become the proof. You do not wait for the external world to confirm that your dream is possible. You confirm it yourself, internally, repeatedly, faithfully, until your mind accepts it as fact and begins to organize itself around that fact, noticing opportunities it would have missed, making decisions it would not have made, taking actions it would not have taken. The seed does not see the harvest. The seed does not know the weather. The seed does not understand the complex interaction of soil and sun and rain that will determine its future. The seed only knows one thing: be the seed. Do what seeds do. Trust the process. And one morning, without warning, without fanfare, without explanation, the green breaks through the soil. There is a story Napoleon Hill told about a man he encountered during his years of research. A man who had lost everything. His business had failed, not gradually but spectacularly, taking with it not only his income but his reputation, his confidence, his sense of place in the world. His health was declining, as health often does when the spirit is under prolonged assault. His family was living in poverty, in conditions far below anything they had known before. By every external measure, by every standard the world uses to judge such things, he was a man without hope, without resources, without a future. And yet, when Hill met him, when he sat across from this man and looked into his eyes and asked him to describe his situation, the man did not describe himself the way the world would have described him. He did not say, "I am a failure." He did not say, "I am ruined." He did not say, "I am finished." He said something else entirely. He described himself as a man between successes. He spoke of his current circumstances as temporary, not as permanent, not as defining, not as the final verdict on who he was and what he could become. Temporary, a season, a passage, a bridge between what had been and what would be. He spoke of his future as though it was already written, already certain, already accomplished, and he was simply waiting to catch up to it. Not waiting passively, not waiting in resignation, but waiting the way a runner waits for the starting gun, already poised, already prepared, already certain of the race ahead. This was not denial. This was not positive thinking used as a shield against reality, a way of pretending the pain did not exist. The pain existed. The loss was real. The circumstances were genuinely difficult. He did not pretend otherwise. But he had learned something that most people never learn, something that separates those who eventually rise from those who remain where they have fallen. He had learned to separate circumstance from identity. Listen carefully to this distinction, because it is subtle and it is powerful, and it is the difference between a life of quiet desperation and a life of quiet becoming. Most people fuse circumstance and identity together so completely that they cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. They look at their situation and they draw conclusions about themselves. They look at their bank account and they decide they are poor. They look at their failed business and they decide they are a failure. They look at their unrecognized efforts and they decide they are unimportant. Circumstance becomes identity. Identity becomes circumstance. And the two are locked together in a tight, suffocating embrace that allows no room for change, no space for becoming, no possibility of transformation. But the man Hill met had undone this fusion. He had separated the two with a blade of awareness so sharp, so precise, that they no longer touched. His circumstance said, "You have no money." His identity said, "I am a man who creates value." His circumstance said, "Your business failed." His identity said, "I'm learning what does not work so I can discover what does." His circumstance said, "You are invisible, unnoticed, unrecognized." His identity said, "I am preparing for the moment I will be seen." Do you see what happened there? The circumstance was not denied. It was acknowledged fully, clearly, without flinching. Yes, the money is gone. Yes, the business failed. Yes, no one is paying attention right now. But those facts describe the situation. They do not describe the self. They are what is happening, not who is happening to. And this distinction, this seemingly small shift in language, in thought, in self-perception, changes everything. Because circumstances change. They always change. They are like weather, like seasons, like the tide. They come and they go. They rise and they fall. They are temporary by their very nature. But identity, when it is rooted in something deeper than circumstance, can remain steady through any storm. It can hold. It can wait. It can continue being itself while the world rearranges itself around it. Most people believe that their identity is formed by their circumstances. This is the default setting of the human mind, the unexamined assumption most carry from childhood to grave. I am poor because I have no money. I am a failure because I failed. I'm unimportant because no one has recognized me yet. The logic seems unassailable. It seems like simple honesty, like facing facts, like telling the truth about oneself. But the achievers Hill studied had reversed this equation entirely. They did not derive identity from circumstance. They did not wait for the world to tell them who they were. They did not allow their situation to define their selfhood. They imposed identity upon circumstance. They acted as if their desired identity was already true, not in spite of their circumstances, but alongside them, beneath them, deeper than them. They carried their identity like a seed carries the oak, invisible but present, dormant but alive, waiting for the conditions that would allow it to emerge. And over time, inevitably, irresistibly, the circumstances rearranged themselves to match the identity they had claimed. This is not wishful thinking. This is not pretending. This is not the power of positive thinking used as a magic spell to conjure wealth from poverty. This is something far more practical, far more grounded, far more achievable. This is the quiet, stubborn work of becoming, long before the world agrees that you have arrived. The farmer does not become a farmer on harvest day. The farmer becomes a farmer the moment he places the seed in the ground. The identity comes first. The action comes second. The result comes third. But most people wait for the result before they will accept the identity. They wait for the harvest before they will call themselves farmers. And while they wait, the season passes, the ground lies fallow, and the seed never gets planted. The seed does not see the harvest. The seed does not know the weather. The seed does not understand the complex interplay of sun and rain and soil that will determine its future. The seed only knows one thing: be the seed. Do what seeds do. Surrender to the process of becoming, and trust that what is planted in darkness will eventually emerge into light. This is the thinking of every great achiever. They do not wait for permission. They do not wait for proof. They do not wait until they feel like the person they wish to become. They do not wait for the external world to confirm that their self-perception is accurate. They simply begin acting as if that person already exists. They speak as that person would speak. They decide as that person would decide. They move through the world with the quiet authority of someone who has already received what they are still waiting for. They carry themselves like the person they are becoming, not the person they have been. And the world, which is always watching, always responding, always matching energy with energy, always treating people according to the signals they send, the world eventually recognizes what they have claimed. Not because the world is fair, not because the universe is listening, but because the person who acts as if they are already the person they wish to become makes different decisions, takes different actions, notices different opportunities, responds to different cues. They are not waiting for the world to change them. They are changing themselves, and the world is simply responding to what they have become. The man between successes understood this. He did not wait until his circumstances improved to feel like a success. He felt like a success while his circumstances were still difficult, and that feeling shaped his actions, and his actions shaped his future. He did not wait for the harvest. He planted the seed, and then he waited, not with anxiety, not with desperation, but with the quiet patience of a farmer who knows what is happening underground, even though he cannot see it. That is the thinking of great achievers. That is the separation of circumstance from identity. That is the quiet, stubborn work of becoming. And it is available to you right now, in whatever circumstances you currently find yourself. Not because your circumstances do not matter. They matter very much, but because you are more than your circumstances. You are the one who is living through them. You are the one who will outlast them. You are the one who will become, regardless of what is happening around you, the person you have already decided to be. There comes a point in every genuine transformation when the shift is no longer effort, when the acting becomes being, when the pretending becomes presence, when the thing you have been practicing, repeating, rehearsing in the quiet hours of your own mind finally stops being something you do and starts being something you are. This is not a dramatic moment. There are no violins swelling in the background. There is no sudden lightning strike of understanding, no voice from the sky, no dramatic revelation that changes everything in an instant. It is quieter than that. So quiet, so subtle, so easy to overlook that most people miss it entirely. They are so accustomed to the struggle, so familiar with the effort, so conditioned to the tension, that they do not recognize the moment the tension finally releases. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday, an ordinary morning. The light comes through the window the way it always does. The sounds outside are the same sounds you have heard 1,000 times. You wake up, and you realize, perhaps with a small surprise, that you have not braced yourself for the day. You have not rehearsed the disappointments that might await you. You have not prepared your heart for failure. You have not run through the mental list of everything that could go wrong. You simply opened your eyes, and the future was not something to survive. It was something to receive. This is the awakening. Not the moment you finally get what you wanted. Not the moment the bank account fills or the recognition arrives or the obstacle finally moves. Not the moment the phone rings with the news you have been waiting for, or the letter arrives with the acceptance you have been hoping for, or the door opens to reveal the opportunity you have been preparing for. Those are merely confirmations. They are echoes. They are the sound of the stone finally hitting the bottom of the lake, long after the ripples have begun to spread. They arrive long after the real work has been done. The real work happens in the quiet, in the invisible, in the decision you make, alone, when no one is watching and no one will applaud and no one will even know you made it. The decision that no external event can create for you and no external event can take away. The decision that is yours alone to make, and yours alone to keep. The decision to act as if everything always works out. Not because you have proof. Not because you are naive. Not because you have never been disappointed before. You have been disappointed, perhaps many times, perhaps recently, perhaps in ways that left marks you still carry. But you have finally understood something that disappointment could never teach you, something that only experience, only reflection, only the slow accumulation of quiet wisdom can reveal. You have finally understood that the posture you bring to your future is not passive. It is not merely a reflection of your circumstances. It is not simply a reaction to what has happened to you. It is an active, creative force that shapes your circumstances. It is the hand that guides the plow. It is the eye that sees the harvest before the seed has even been planted. It is the quiet, steady current that determines, over time and through countless small decisions, where your life will finally arrive. You do not brace for impact. You open your hands to receive. And in that opening, something shifts. Not in the universe. The universe does not care whether you brace or receive. The sun rises either way. The seasons turn either way. The world continues its indifferent rotation either way. The shift happens in you, in your nervous system, in your decision-making, in the thousand small choices you make each day without conscious awareness. You choose the slightly more courageous path because you are no longer conserving energy for self-protection. The energy you once spent on bracing, on preparing for the worst, on rehearsing disappointment, is now available for other purposes. It flows into your voice when you speak. It flows into your hands when you work. It flows into your steps when you move towards something uncertain. You speak your truth a little more clearly because you are no longer waiting for permission. You no longer need someone else to confirm that your voice deserves to be heard. You no longer need guarantees that your words will be received well. You speak because speaking is what you do. You speak because the person you are becoming speaks clearly, honestly, without apology. You persist through difficulty a little longer because you no longer interpret difficulty as evidence that you are on the wrong path. Difficulty is no longer a sign to turn back. Difficulty is simply part of the terrain. It is what every traveler encounters. It is not personal. It is not punishment. It is not proof of failure. It is simply the landscape through which the path runs. And slowly, quietly, without fanfare, without announcement, without any moment you could point to and say, "That was when it happened," the life you were waiting for begins to catch up to the person you have become. This is the principle that Napoleon Hill spent more than 20 years trying to articulate. This is the inheritance he tried to pass on. Not a formula for getting rich. Not a technique for manipulating others. Not a secret method for bending the universe to your will. Something far simpler and far more profound. You do not wait for the water to still before you drop the stone. You drop the stone, and you trust the ripples. You trust the reflection to return. You trust the process that has carried every achiever before you and will carry every achiever after you. You trust because you have finally understood that waiting for stillness is waiting for something that never comes. The water is never perfectly still. There's always some disturbance, some breeze, some movement. If you wait for perfect conditions, you will wait forever. The stone does not wait. The stone drops. The water accepts it. The ripples do their work. And the reflection, though briefly disturbed, always returns. This is the quiet awakening. This is the moment you realize you have been living inside the wrong story. The story that said you must be ready before you act. The story that said you must be certain before you commit. The story that said you must protect yourself from disappointment by expecting the worst. That story was never true. It only felt true because you had told it to yourself so many times. But you can stop telling it. You can lay it down. You can open your hands and let it fall, the way you once held that stone above the water. And you do not need to see the shore to know you are moving toward it. You do not need to see the bottom to know the water will hold you. You do not need to see the future to know that the posture you bring to it matters more than any prediction, any preparation, any protection you could possibly devise. You simply need to stop bracing and begin becoming, not all at once, not perfectly, not without moments when the old tension returns, when the old habits resurface, when you catch yourself rehearsing disappointment again. That is normal. That is human. That is not failure. That is simply the old path, the old groove, reminding you that it still exists. But you have carved a new path now, a new groove, a new river, and each time you choose it, each time you drop the stone without bracing, each time you open your hands to receive whatever comes, the new path deepens. The new river flows more freely. The new way becomes more natural, until one ordinary Tuesday, you wake up and you realize you have become the person you were only pretending to be. And the future, which once seemed so far away, so uncertain, so dangerous, is finally, gently, quietly arriving to meet you exactly where you stand. So tonight, if you find yourself lying awake, rehearsing what might go wrong, preparing your heart for disappointment, waiting for a guarantee that will never arrive, I want to invite you to try something different. Not louder hope, not desperate optimism, just a quiet decision to act tomorrow morning, as if the outcome you desire is already certain. Not because you can prove it, not because you are ignoring reality, but because you have finally understood that the person who receives what they want is not different from you. They have not been blessed by a luckier fate. They have simply made a different agreement with their own future. They have stopped bracing. They have started becoming. And so can you. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Not without fear. But a little more each day. A little more each decision. Until one ordinary morning, you wake up and realize the weight you have been carrying has finally, quietly, set you down. And the future you once feared is finally, gently arriving to meet you.